welcome to episode 55 of It's Never Sunny in Seattle, a Seattle Mariners podcast. I'm your host today, Evan James, joined by the one and only Michael Ahedo. Obviously, Anders isn't with us today. He is experiencing a little COVID, so get well soon, Anders. Excited to have you back. Obviously, you're going to miss the big news for today, which is we get to talk trades. And it's pretty exciting because not just because a lot of things happened yesterday, but because the Mariners in particular made quite a few moves that we think are pretty interesting. They reinforced the team with a backup catcher, potentially a platoon backup infielder, and theoretically a swingman, which is something they haven't really had all year. And obviously, the big news is that Castillo is going to be pitching today. The Mariners have a morning baseball game against the Yankees after they stole what was one of the best wins of the season last night. Man, this team just continues to be annoying against really good teams. So, Mikey, let's kick it off right away. Of the Mariners trades that they did yesterday, because obviously you and Durst talked quite a bit about Castillo, who has your eye of the three names that they brought in yesterday?
That's a good one. I think just like because of my bias, because of let's see, since 2018, I've really, like I said on Twitter, quite adored him. My eyes most specifically on Matthew Boyd. It was really interesting, when the deadline moves went down. I did not expect a Luis Castillo, as we talked about. I really would have liked, I think more of an impact bat in some way, even if it's literally Donovan Solano. But I feel like the ability to really round out the rotation, so getting Castillo and then figuring out something to do with Flexen and Marco potentially would be rad. Although Matthew Boyd is said to be a multi-inning reliever. So I'm really interested to see in the way that I'm trying to think. I don't know that we see pitchers like Kendall Graveman, transition from starter to reliever, what they kind of look like. Matthew Boyd, because his fastball shape's not good, which makes me, I tweeted out, I'd like to see him move to a one seam or two seam. Maybe the velo bump alone helps him, but I'm gonna stop talking and let you reflect on that.
I'm really curious, actually. I want you to continue talking about Matt Boyd because his numbers are pretty interesting. He's essentially always been good. He has a positive WAR value every year of his career that he's functionally played or been healthy, so he's never been bad. In fact, he's been quite good. He was worth 3.2 wins in 2019, which is not long ago. He was worth a win and a half last year. So even with some degradation in skill and some health questions, it feels like when he's been on the field, he's generally been good. And I have a theory that Jerry likes to trade for players currently on the IL because it feels like he's getting some kind of instant bonus value for them because trades just generally don't happen for injured players because there's no guarantee they're coming back with any kind of time frame. There's no guarantee they're going to fit into a spot and be healthy right away. But Jerry likes to take these guys he doesn't currently have any room for and stash them somewhere. And Boyd is really interesting in that regard because he might be one of the Mariners' top 4 starting pitchers when he's totally healthy. Am I completely off base on that?
The quote from Corey Brock makes me think that they'll leave him in the bullpen, but I'm not certain. He is really interesting. He said he'll be a multi-inning reliever. And I kind of think he could potentially be a swingman if they need it because we don't want to see Justice Sheffield pitching in the playoffs or anything like that, or in September.
He has a 6.34 ERA in AAA.
Really?
Yeah.
6?
Yeah.
He's always been really interesting. Boyd, that is, because in 2019 he was running some really strong numbers. Like he had, I mean, if you want to look at K per 9, it was like in the 11s, but he had a 30% K percentage and a 6% walk percentage. That's better than most starters now. the issue was that like his ERA wasn't that great, his FIP wasn't that great. Uh, if you look at it, it's because he gave up a lot of home runs, and he has a career 14% home runs per fly ball percentage, and again, that's because he doesn't like he has a fastball that for whatever reason like hitters swing through, but when they do make contact, they've always put it over the fence, and so I don't know what the tweak is per se, because he has lost that slider that he threw before. um I don't I I kind of tend to think that the Mariners, based on what they've been doing lately, I wouldn't be surprised if Boyd started throwing a two seamer, I should call it, because it's not going to sink a ton. um he had a really good slider that just didn't. I don't know what happened, but over the years, the pitch characteristics didn't change that much. But I expect to see some sort of different fastball, which he's been toying with, and I think his sinker is better than his fastball. Maybe they toy with the slider, but at the end of the day, I think being able to move from 92 to whatever it was, maybe 94 in the bullpen, because like he had some success at higher velos before, where the home runs, if I remember correctly, were going away somewhat. Um, so he's always really fascinated me. All that he needs to do is limit the home runs. And one way that you can do that is just look at like what pitches do I give up home runs on, and you'll find it's the fastball. So really, it's how can I get hitters off my fastball? What the Mariners have been doing lately is sinkers, two seamers. But what he could also do is, more get me over curveballs, way more sliders, which I think is one answer, and more sinkers playing off the fastball.
It's exciting to think that the team could unlock something that he doesn't already have. And he really is. I think to me, obviously Castillo is the big deadline piece, but he's probably the guy who's going to play the most out of the rest of them. And Caselli will get some time for sure, but Cal is still very much definitively the starter. Uh, I think with Boyd, what I will be looking for is how Scott actually uses him, because yes, Jerry is coming out and saying he's a multi-inning guy. Scott doesn't really roll that way in my experience. Scott is a very one inning guy. Every once in a while, he'll put Seawald out for two. And they've attempted to make Brash a multi-inning guy, but have kind of wavered on it, because as soon as he starts walking people, everybody gets cold feet on the idea. Understandably so. I've seen how it goes. So it will be interesting to see if they really do utilize Boyd in kind of a 2-3 inning role. The Mariners need that. I really think that they do. This specialist bullpen that they've tightrope walked this entire way is awesome, and I love watching them pitch, but there are times like last night where it's a little nerve-wracking. And there have definitely been games recently where they could have pulled a starter earlier, like Marco a couple nights ago, and having a long man to pitch 3 innings instead of sending out 6 guys would be great. It'd be really good for the team's optimization, and they're going to need that. We talked a little bit yesterday on the Lookout Landing podcast about how the Mariners are playing Houston and New York right now, and we're getting to see how the team matches up against clearly superior teams. And it's been interesting, right? They've played better at times than I thought they would, and they almost pulled 2 of 4 from the Houston. But I think it's clear watching them that we are a tier down from these teams we're playing right now. And yeah, I'm just interested to see how they manage to finagle more wins out of this. But let's talk about Jake Lamb here for a sec, because we've been talking a little bit about Toro on this podcast for a couple of weeks about how we want him to get sent down, not because we're like way down on him, but because we think he needs a mechanical tweak. He needs at bats and to get right to contribute to this team where he's at right now. And it seems like Jake Lamb is an interesting option to take some of those at bats and to maybe be kind of a diamond in the rough. He was the star of Dodgers spring training this year, apparently. Went super nuclear earlier in the year, but didn't actually get to play until last month. I believe he was called up in June. Mikey, do you see anything interesting about Jake Lamb and his statistics this year that indicate he could be a little bit of a spark for this team?
Yeah, that uptick in spring performance, just him kind of flexing on everyone. That coincides with the swing change that I don't know if it was even the first time he's done so, but it is the first time he's done so with the Dodgers, who are a smart team. Um, and he's always been someone who's been able to hit right-handed hitters. So I think he immediately slots in as someone who can spell Suarez, can play a little bit of first base, can technically fake it in left field. Um, I can't speak to how he looks out there, but um, I think he did have some bat path issues that like he's hitting the ball really, really well now. Like when you look at Exwell Bacon, he was pretty much like reliably 390 for from 2019 to 2021. He's up 535 now, so he's up 140 points, which small sample size, but I do think it's legit because it correlates with the change. So Rake Lamb, I remember back in the day, I think if I remember correctly, he had like a 30 home run season with the Diamondbacks, um, and was someone that people were really excited about. And then he was never the same, which he tore up his shoulder after that, and he always said, that's not why I fell off, but it does make you think. So I I forgot the verbiage I used. A deeply, deeply unsexy move, but an effective one, and one that I would have preferred a Solano or a Wilmer Flores probably, but a lefty bat that can rake against righties that plays most days.
Indeed. And if you look at his stats, obviously he went gangbusters in 2016 and 2017 with Arizona. His numbers this year, across the board, are suspiciously close to that in a very small sample size, but they are indeed indicative of that kind of talent level. And who knows, I don't think he's going to actually play that much. I think we're looking at him for 100-ish plate appearances, right? He's only had 77 plate appearances so far this year, so he's very much a part-time platoon guy. But he again could be a useful piece. I think that the general feeling I have about the things the Mariners did at this trade deadline outside of Castillo is that they were augmenting what was already here as opposed to like really adding to it the way that other teams did. So with that, let's talk about the last piece they traded for, which is it Casali or Casali? Curt Casali? Curt
I
Casali?
feel like I heard people say Casali, but it's
Casali.
probably
Okay.
Casali.
Casali. Curt. We're gonna go with Curt. But Curt is coming here, and it's a little sad because Torrens is actually in the lineup today. And it seems like this is probably going to be his last game with the team to some degree. I'm suspicious that they put him on a phantom IL stint. They say the shoulder's acting up again or something, just in case they need to catcher again in a month or so. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a little bit of a liability to have only two catchers in your organization at any one time. But Casali's coming in, and he again is a pretty like good baseball player. He's not remarkable in any sense, but he has, I think, a 102 WRC plus right now, which is obviously much better than Torrens, is really interesting from a backup catcher perspective. And the defense is solid. And he's kind of like, God, I can never remember his name. He's a little bit in the Jonathan Lucroy mold, or who's the guy that the Mariners had a couple of years ago, like very early on in the Dipoto era, veteran
Chris
guy.
Iannetta,
No. Oh, was it Chris
really?
Iannetta? There have been a few.
I feel
There's
like
Chris Herman. There's Chris Iannetta. There's so
they're
many.
all
Um,
the same.
yeah, they're all the same. But he's going to be an interesting piece and fill a hole. And Mikey, do you think there's some kind of like something the Mariners can unlock with Casali, or is he really just going to be in the floor that we need underneath this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think if not to be that guy, but I feel like if any team is going to unlock a player like him, it is the Giants. And he spent I guess, a year and a half with them. Uh, if you look at teams, well, the Reds aren't very smart, but he started his career with the Rays, and then uh, finished with the Giants. So like smart teams like him. He's just a really steady backup catcher, which is really valuable because usually catchers it's kind of a shit show. He pretty much always hits. Like he does oscillate, but he generally hits about league average. He does a decent job behind the plate. Um, I think that's a huge win. Because yeah, like I don't know how much DRS matters. But like he's got a plus DRS. His framing it seems fine. Um, and I think so. First, I think it's important to note that um, Castillo and him have a relationship. Castillo's thrown to him before, and Castillo, again, small sample size, but pitched better to Casali than to other guys. So I mean, if Terens is going to be hitting, a 46 WRC plus, uh, I think Terens has shown us he, at least for now, isn't a good player. Maybe he is one day, and I do recall, him being a popular name for Jerry Dipoto when teams would call on him. But I mean, if you're not a good defensive catcher and you can't hit, what's the point? Currently has an ISO of 0.017, which means his slugging percentage is 0.017 higher than his average, which basically means he only hits singles.
He has
Bad.
no home runs this year, right? Still 0, I believe.
0 with a 34% K percentage.
Nice. I'm suspicious that he is hurt. I don't know how, and I don't know when. It feels like it has to have been all year since spring training, because the reality is he has not looked right all year at all. It's not since spring even, and who knows? It's really disappointing, honestly, because I'm probably the low man on Terens in general among both Lookout Landing and here. And but I don't like to be down on him because I don't see any value in that, but also because he is interesting from a very technical perspective. He's still young, he has a lot of major league experience. He doesn't have prospect pedigree, but he's always played above the expectations for him up until really this year to some degree. I think the fact that he hasn't worked out is kind of a bummer because he would have been a diamond in the rough for this team if he had hit the way it looked like he could last year. But Casali is a floor underneath this team. Casali, Lamb, and Boyd are all a floor underneath this team so that we are not pitching Asher Wojciechowski and we are not bringing Kevin Padlow back. And those are all good things. But I'm going to roll this into a question we had from King Hippo, one of our most dedicated Discord fans. And his question is, if the Mariners could have made other trades, taken the position of another team, gotten to different players based on the way everything worked out yesterday, who would it be? I have an answer to this, but I want to hear what you have to say first, Mikey.
Oh God! I mean, I would have liked to get Soto. It's funny. I think Anders was kind of saying like the tendency of everyone is to be like, oh, the Mariners should have got in on that, and it's like that's not really the reality of of how it works. I mean, yeah, I would like to take chances on some of these guys, but sometimes teams just don't like what you have to offer. I think in terms of guys that moved that I would have loved to have gotten, Harrison Bader for Jordan Montgomery. I don't know what the Mariners equivalent is, so I mean, just to rattle off Montgomery's numbers: 3.69 ERA, 97 strikeouts, and 114-ish innings. That's that's not amazing. Obviously, the Mariners don't have much to trade from in terms of starting pitchers, but I feel like they maybe could have done something. Drury went for what I feel like is pretty much nothing. I wasn't very interested in him. So I kind of think it's probably Oh, I love Michael Givens. I didn't know that the Mets got him. He's someone that I wrote about in the offseason as free agency's Paul Sewald. So I think I'll look over some other names, but I think that Bader does so much because I said, finding someone who can fake it in center field would be pretty, it would really help this team. He can do more than fake it in center field. He might be, I'd have to look, but he's one of the best defensive center fielders in baseball with power and the ability to make some contact. So, lots of upside there.
Who's the guy that played in New York forever? The Yankees center fielder. I think this is the first year he hasn't played for them in like 15 years.
Oh, I was going to say Bernie Williams.
No,
I don't know, Brett Gardner.
Brett Gardner, yes.
Mm.
This is essentially a Brett Gardner redux replacement type. And that's great. The Yankees like to have a plus defensive outfielder that can spell their otherwise bulky need outfield, which is good. I actually am on the other side. I agree with you. I think that the JMO for Harrison Bader trade is, in my opinion, the most interesting one of the deadline. I understand that the
Mm.
Soto deal was like the Giga Chad Mega Buster blockbuster deal, but I think that the JMO trade was really interesting because the Yankees traded from a position of strength to get something they didn't have and then went in and redoubled down and got two starting pitchers anyway. And
Mm.
I love that. To me, the Mariners version of that would have been like trading two outfielders and then bringing in Soto. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
something aggressive like that. And Jordan Montgomery is really good. I was kind of pissed actually when I saw that the Yankees traded him because he would very handily fit into our rotation as like the third or fourth best pitcher immediately. And
Yeah.
they managed to discard him for, I mean, Harrison Bader is really good, but he has plantar fasciitis right now and is going to be a center fielder. That's
Yikes.
really interesting. Yeah, we'll see how that goes, first of all. And two, like, a starting pitcher is just a rare quantity, in my opinion. Then Bader is good, but he's not a top 10 center fielder. He's more like a top 20 guy. And I just really would have loved to have Montgomery. I really would have. That trade also shocked me because Jordan Montgomery has been a Yankees prospect darling,
Mm-hmm.
really forever since he came up. So the fact that they traded him just was generally surprising to me. But like you said, we don't need to go into all the different trades. We touched a little bit on, let me say this. So my answer to King Hippo's question, what other teams moves would I have made? I would have made the Yankees moves. If you had to pick one team, who would it be for you?
Oh, I don't know. The Padres. Uh let's see. I don't know. The Mets did kind of a similar thing to the Mariners where it's like unsexy moves but effective. The Rays kind of did the same thing. I do kind of think it's the Yankees. They're so smart. Scott Efros, I tweeted about him too. I think he's one of the better relievers in MLB, and they got him for not very much. They got Montas and Trevino, who I think is really interesting. Throws the super sweeper that I think they're going to have him throw. And last night it was the pitch that he threw the most. Um, so I don't know, not to be unoriginal, but I do think the Yankees is my answer.
They had a good deadline. Like credit where it's
Yeah.
due. They are the evil empire, but they had a really good team and came in and made meaningful improvements and didn't give up their best prospects. That's a trifecta where I sit. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that we both like the Yankees a lot. Before we move on and talk a little bit more about the Mariners, do you have any specific stuff you wanted to talk about in terms of other trades without getting into everything? Because obviously it was a clusterfuck yesterday.
Well, let's see. I think well, I don't know if anyone asked really, but I think it's worth just kind of talking about. So actually, I tweeted this yesterday, I think, but what I said was, had the Mariners acquired Boyd, Casali, Lamb, and then got Castillo, the reception is completely different. Um, and I think we all kind of knew that after we got Castillo that this is how it was going to go. But I think there's still that little, you know, the thing in the back of your head that's like they could still get Soto or whatever. And you know, like I have been pretty clear that I think this is a win. Again, like to add to the front of your rotation in a context where, you know, there's a 3-game playoff, there's an extra wild card spot this year. I was actually just looking it up last night. Trying to remember. I think the top 2 wildcard teams play each other, and the bottom one plays the bottom divisional winner. So, you know, I think if you're the Mariners, you really hope that you're the first or second wild card. But also, if you're the Mariners, I think you just hope that you're in the playoffs. So really, what I'm trying to get to is like, is this a win of an offseason? I think so. I think it's at least a B, or not offseason. I think it's at least a B deadline. Would I have liked to see other things? Of course. Like I've said, I would have liked to have an option in case Julio goes down, because Julio is down. Because right now that's Jared Kelnick, who has not looked good, which actually will probably transition into.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
We will get there. Yeah.
So, you know, someone who can, again, fake it in center field because they don't need to be awesome. And I think second base was such an easy area to address because, you know, you could push Adam Frazier into the outfield. You could have added another starting pitcher, maybe. You could have added a Michael Givens. But overall, you know, when you look at this team, it's like, what were their holes or black holes? It's like they don't really have a backup catcher. They have a backup catcher now. They didn't have much to speak of in terms of bench bats because, you know, it was like Dylan Moore and Sam Haggerty. They have a bench bat now. And now they have more of a weapon in the bullpen if we think that Matthew Boyd is a weapon. So I'm not going to act like when people are so down on the offseason or the deadline, whatever it may be, it makes me feel like a bootlicker and like a Jerry DePoto truther. But I'm just like, I'm trying to imagine a deadline in which Castillo isn't acquired and the Mariners do the same thing, but they also maybe get a Solano and a back end starting pitcher. Like, people probably like that more because more things happened. But this is obviously more superior. I think it sets them up better for, you know, the end of season context. So yeah, if the Mariners miss the playoffs, I'll eat crow. But I think this is, you know, my perception is that this was a strong deadline that, you know, maybe could have used a little more. But it's hard to know what the negotiations look like, you know. So I'm interested to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that what I said yesterday on the other pod too is that there's no equivalency between trades between different teams, right? A lot of the times when you're reading about the reaction people are having, they're like, "Oh, well, I would have done this," and it's like,
right.
We don't have those players. Like we couldn't make these trades. And I understand wanting to equivocate because we're all kind of doing this as armchair GMs, as fans. And what's interesting to me is that our metrics, not just for this podcast, but for Mariner stuff in general, is way up. And in all of baseball is way up this week because a lot of casual interest comes during the trade deadline because people play fantasy and people like to roster bait. And so there is kind of this attitude that the big names are the only thing that's interesting. And I could see a casual fan looking at the Mariners trades and being like, who on earth are these people that they traded for? Right. Like they're not names, they're not famous athletes necessarily. They're very much niche role players in a sport where there are hundreds of players in each org. So I get it. I get from like a name recognition perspective that this could be underwhelming. I'm going to roll what I'm saying into Zach Cabell's question, which is the Mariners not being as good as the Yankees or Astros, getting an ace and pitching your way to an upset. Is that our best chance at a World Series? Two answers to that. One, yes, right? Like, duh. The Mariners are not as good as the Astros and Yankees. What they've done is given themselves a shot. Yeah. If you want to win, you have to play in the game. You got to go to the dance. You need a ticket to the show. They appear to have punch said ticket to the playoffs, at least in my opinion. Obviously, we got to get there, fingers crossed, but so far so good. The flip side to that answer is the Mariners could have gone way bigger balls, right? Like they could have traded everyone, their entire top 6, top 8 for Soto. They could have just, emptied the farm system, Hancock, Ford, Kelnick, Noelvi, everybody. And that would have gotten them more. But there is a balance between bankrupting your organization from the majors down and investing in that and also looking to the future. And the Mariners have so many players who are young and under club control that I don't think it made sense to be 1000% all in on this year, that it made sense to be as all in as you could be with what you had to trade and what was expendable, but to keep your pieces moving forward. And they did that. They didn't trade Kirby. They didn't trade Cal. They didn't trade Logan. They kept the pieces that they needed to be competitive in 2022 here. So, Zach, to answer your question, yeah, I think this was the right move. It wasn't the only move, right? There is a reality where the Mariners do something way more extreme, but this was the fiscally responsible move. Mikey, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways that the deadline could have gone. And like I said, like at the end of the day, and I think Dipoto kind of alluded to this, really this offseason, or I keep saying that shit, this deadline, I'm so used to the offseason, and last deadline, like, we're kind of at the mercy of other people and like what they're wanting to do. Also, I think Cespedes Barbecue made a tweet about like, I almost said offseason, deadline activity and trade activity relative to last year. It's a little lower than last year, it looks like. And so, it's like how, like, in that way, their hands are tied. To answer the question, yeah, I don't know that there are. I'm trying to think of a way to put this. Essentially, you kind of have to choose between like being pragmatic to an extent. Like you can be optimistic, but also pragmatic, and trying to make the World Series. And if they wanted to make the World Series, they probably had to go get someone like they had to empty out the farm, because they are not the same team that, like, when you look at really good teams going out and like the Yankees getting Bader and Efros and whoever else, like it's the rich getting richer. The Mariners are like the middle class getting middle classier. So
we got stimulus checks. We're the middle class getting stimulus checks is what that was.
So it, like, in a way, yes, because I think their best way of making the World Series is getting into the playoffs. I think that they improved their chances of getting into the playoffs with these trades. And I'm gonna pull up like their I don't know how the playoff odds work in terms of this, but
we have the 4th best playoff odds in the American League right now.
Yeah, 77 basically percent. And for a wild card berth, I imagine we're actually that. Yeah, we're that. No, that doesn't make sense. Oh, here we go. Yeah, second highest after the Blue Jays. The Rays are trending down, but that's scary because the Rays are good. So really the team to look out for is Boston right now.
Hi, Kitty.
Yeah, he's a little monster. But yeah, so to answer the question, this is probably the correct-ish route.
I love it. Let's pivot because I'm dying to talk about Jarred Kelenic. And where do we start, man? Where do we start with Jarred? Let's start with the new stance. So Jarred has taken 4 at bats for the Mariners since he's been back, and he has 3 strikeouts and a ground out, I believe.
Yeah.
Mikey, Jarred has this new open stance, and I'm gonna be honest. It doesn't look so great. It doesn't, like, the whole thing he's doing doesn't look so great. I'm not super technical when it comes to evaluating, swing stances and kind of like the mechanics of this, the way that you or Joe are. I'm wondering, what do you think on earth he's doing? Because he looks so out of sync to me.
I actually, I presume it's the one that he was using in late July in the minor leagues, which the video that I've seen is off, off kilter. It doesn't. I don't know. Like, yeah, it doesn't look great to me either. And again, I'm not the scoutiest either. You know, I think there's a lot of other people that are better than I am in that way. I I'm trying to remember if this is supposed to be. Well, I've heard that the Mariners don't think that it's mechanical, um, and I think a lot of that makes sense. Like it's kind of a head thing. Really, like breaking ball recognition, whatever. Every guy's different, and so when you look at someone, you're like that doesn't work. Some of the time it will. Like, I don't know, JP Crawford to me looks like he'll never hit league average, but he's been a league average hitter. um I think generally what you're looking for is just consistency. Like, can a guy repeat his mechanics? Are his upper and lower half in sync? Because if they're not, basically, like, the more noise that you add to your setup, the more likely that something gets a little out of whack, and you go on a you have a slump for 15-20 games. um to me, Jared Kelenic has a fair amount of noise. Maybe the open stance helps him see the ball better, maybe not. um he at least has some of that movement that I've always talked about, kind of in his hands, that I think are probably going to help him sync up the upper and lower half and have that timing mechanism. But I can't even think of the hitter that it reminds me of. But it just, like, not Johnny Damon, but like it's almost kind of a similar thing where it's a lot, or it feels like a lot. um I haven't seen him at the major league level yet. I've had a very busy, like, 2 or 3 weeks. So I haven't actually gotten to see it. But based on, yeah, just like what I've heard, and obviously the results, I think he needs to settle in, and I think he needs to be given time to do so. But wow, like, I was kind of optimistic about him like a couple weeks ago, and now, like, it does not feel good to have him up at all.
No, and I was really excited to see him again, honestly, because I wanted to see what changes he had made, if the recognition was going to stick. I'm gonna be honest, guys. I really like Jared as both as a prospect, just because he's a close to a 5 tool guy. I like him. He's a cool kid. J.K. Joker, like, kind of against the world. He's got a little edge to him. Smell you
Is
later.
Joker
Hits
a
home
thing?
runs. Yeah,
Is
the Joker persona is part of his whole branding thing, but which is its own
Oh,
cringe.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But all of that works better if he's good, right? It's a little harder to be like the anti-hero if you're just not good. I'm out on Jared. I think just watching him come back, I was so excited to see what it is he did different, and I'm still excited because he is going to get a little more playing time. Julio's not coming back for another couple days. He doesn't look like a guy to me who has gone to the minor leagues, made changes, improved his approach, really refined things, and looks like a different guy. He still looks like a dude who is just completely lost, and
Mhm.
that was okay a year ago, even several months ago. But the truth is that we're rapidly coming up where he's going to have over 1,000 professional plate appearances, AAA or above, by the end of this year or early next year
Whoa.
in all likelihood. He's not green anymore. You know what I mean? Like, the reality is that he has the experience where we need to start seeing some results from him sooner than later. He is approaching bust territory quickly, and I'm bummed. I don't know how else to put it. I'm really bummed. He was somebody I was very excited for. And I think that if you look at the Mariners and the success they've had this year with the prospects, the fact that he's really the only one who hasn't worked out, other than Abe Toro, I guess, but he's not. He's less of a Mariners prospect and more of an import from last year. Um, they've done really well with prospects. You know, Cal's done great. Kirby's done great. Julio obviously is the front runner for Rookie of the Year, maybe even MVP. Who knows? Um, Jared looks like a disaster to me, and I'm pretty disappointed about it. I'm wondering, what do you think? What do you think happens with the playing time the rest of the year? Because obviously Julio is going to take center field back, but Trammell is currently on a rehab assignment in AAA. Mitch Haniger is healthy. I'm suspicious that Jared's little audition here is going to get him no playing time the rest of the year.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I don't think that depends on how long he's up. It's kind of a weird thing, but yeah, I don't even know that he sees time in September now, because now you're cutting it close, you know, as a playoff. Like, even though they're at 77%, you know, playoff odds, there's still 2 months of baseball to be played. Things happen really fast. We see, especially in the past or in the last few weeks, like things will happen really fast. Um, Jared Kelnick doesn't help your right now, you know, he doesn't help your team. Um, so, you know, I think that's part of the reason why you go out and get Travis Jankowski, because he can play some center. Um, it's funny. Death Charts has Kyle Lewis playing 2% of the rest of the season center field. I hope not.
Nope.
dear God, I hope not. But they have Kelnick playing 15% of the way, the rest of the way. I don't know why they don't have Trammell, but yeah, I mean, wow, it's just like, it is really sad. He really probably should have taken that contract, and I get why he didn't at the time, but I think we're probably going to find that that was his best shot at getting paid in that way. You know, as like probably for the rest of his career, in terms of because our beers would have been, you know, bought out. So I don't see much of a path for him the rest of the season outside of this audition he's getting now because of the injury, because you know, there's not really enough time to show, you know, you have to build up a lot of goodwill, and right now he's creating a lot of bad will.
Can I throw out a weird comp for Jared?
Sure.
Not in terms of his actual performance, because this guy has actually been much better than Jared. But he reminds me a lot of, just narratively speaking, of a guy who was kind of anointed as the next big thing very, very early and never really panned out. Brett Laurie. And I remember Brett Laurie specifically because Tom McNamara once said that Brett Laurie was the best player he ever scouted, and that if he had any player in the minor leagues that he could pluck and take to the Mariners, that was his answer. Brett Laurie never really panned out. And he, much like Jared and kind of Evan White, crushed the ball. He had really loud exit velocities and stuff when he came up. It just, the hitting never really coalesced. His rookie season, I believe, was his best year. And he, 2.6 WAR in 2011, and he was out of the league by 2016 and never was that good again. And he had some of the problems that Jared had, which is slightly nagging injuries in the lower body, but also he just mechanically never pieced it together the way he looked like he was going to and looked like he was destined to. I see a little bit of that. I see a little bit of Jared not having the pitch recognition and natural hitting ability that a lot of people assumed he did. And it sucks. But let's switch gears. Let's do the last two questions for today, because Mikey's got to go to work and the Mariners are, Luis Castillo's going to play here in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to watch that and do some work.
Let's go.
But let's ask Dave's question first, since there's no new bullpen arms added, technically Boyd, but yeah, I understand. What's your ideal playoff 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, guys? Mikey, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because a lot of it is matchups, and the Mariners do a really good job of that. So I don't necessarily think of it as 7, 8, 9. But in terms of, you know, if we want to talk about high leverage situations, at this point, I think it's the big three of Seawald, Munoz, and Murphy, because maybe I've just caught the wrong games, but Swanee hasn't looked, exactly right since returning. So I think those right now, if you're in higher leverage situations, those are the guys that you want to send out. I think the next tier is probably Swanee, Festa, and then it's like, all right, Baraki and Brash are pitchers. um, so to try and answer the question, I think Seawald 9, Munoz 8, I think Murphy 7, but the Mariners would probably, I think they might use Swanee there.
Or Diego when he's
I've
back.
Oh, I forgot that he was a thing. Um, I've been really impressed with Penn Murphy. He's just shoved. It's been really cool to watch. So yeah, I think that's kind of my order.
Yeah, mine would be the same. I think they like Castillo a lot. I think they kind of alternate Munoz Castillo in the eighth inning spot. They like to stick Seawald in the ninth for the high leverage spot. Penn Murphy has been used kind of perplexingly as a little bit of a mop up guy. They tend to throw him in when the team is getting shelled, and I don't like it because, like you said, he's been really good. He's been definitively one of the top 3-4 guys. It's weird that they want his effective innings in blowouts. I think that Scott really trusts veteran relievers, which is why you see Castillo getting so much run in high leverage situations, even when he doesn't look like he can hit the broadside of a barn. Um, yeah. So my answer is to echo Mikey's. There'll be a little more rotation there. I'm really interested to see if Ken Giles can kind of be healthy and put it together. He's had flashes of being really interesting, both in rehab and for the team, but also flashes of, being ineffective and still injured. So we'll see, right? We'll see.
To speak to your point, let's see. I see 17 pitchers. Guess where Penn Murphy ranks in terms of like average pitch leverage.
Out of 17,
Yeah,
14.
16. So they really are, in terms him and Festa, they're really putting them out there in situations that, like, are not dire. The difference between the two is that, like, Murphy hasn't really struggled. Festa he gave up a lot of home runs early in the year. So, hopefully as the year goes on, and maybe maybe it's because Murphy doesn't throw 95. Like, maybe it's because he throws 89 with his sinker. But when you look at, like, win probability added divided by win or pitch leverage, he's been the second best pitcher. So basically, like, contextless, performance. He's been better than Swanee and Munoz, and maybe that changes, with higher leverage, more difficult hitters. But I think it feels pretty easy to say Penn Murphy's the most underrated pitcher in the bullpen.
Very much so. I mean, maybe Ryan Barecki, but that's because people legitimately don't know he exists. So
This is true.
All right, let's do our last question for today, which is from Azrael PC. He wants to know, what kind of impact do we believe Castillo will have on the clubhouse? I'll answer this not directly. What I will say is, having no idea about Castillo, he seems like a really neat dude. For the record, he's a really exciting personality. I think what's really funny about the Mariners in 2022 is they're sort of like a Mad Lib where someone was like, what if we mashed up the good players from the 2021 Seattle Mariners and the 2021 Reds and became a super team? And that's pretty much what it is. And there was reporting yesterday that Jesse Winker, we don't know it was Jesse Winker, but somebody apparently in the Mariners clubhouse said, like, who the fuck still plays for the Reds or something like that. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, I don't remember where that quote was. I think Zam posted that in the Slack, but yeah, the Mariners are definitely, like, a hodgepodge, a hybrid of two lesser teams at this point. But it's cool, and I think it's good that they got Casali, who is obviously Castillo's catcher. They have these other Reds players, Eugenio and Winker. So like we really do have the all stars of the Reds on our team, and I think that that's cool. And I think that this has worked out well, regardless of how Winker has played. That us acquiring these players has generally been good for the team. Do you have any
Mm.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge. I used the idiom "shot in the arm" the other day, and in a group chat, and everyone was like, What does that mean?" I was like, "What? Like, maybe it's a sports thing."
No, that's definitely a common phrase. So that's on
Right.
them.
I thought so too. But I think he will be. You know, he already has those relationships with Winker and Suarez. Casali, you know, and him obviously have some sort of relationship as battery mates. Um, and I just anytime, you know, you have a really good player come into the clubhouse, I think there's a lot of respect that comes with that and a lot of excitement. Because this really was a message to the Mariners that like, hey, more than ever, literally more than in the past 20 years probably, like we're going to show you that we believe in this team and we believe in your ability to make the playoffs. um so I think I believe in that. You know, I don't know, I'm a therapist. I believe in that 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 aspect of, you know, player performance, and I think the Mariners do too, because they talk about, you know, the culture and the mental side of the game, you know, a lot. um so I'm really excited to see, you know, what it looks like for like a team to be led by Robbie Ray and Castillo. And you know, there lately there have been a lot of, you know, Kirby and Ray playing catch in the outfield, or Flexen, and Flexen starting to throw a slider now. Uh, Ray is showing Kirby a two seamer. Castillo throws one of the filthiest changeups in baseball. So, you know, we do have a lot of sidearm guys. You know, it's like maybe he shows someone that. So we'll see what comes with that too. Just as a side note, I wanted to say, this has nothing to do with this question, but I noticed that again, Logan Gilbert last night was throwing a lot of curveballs. I pulled up, you know, because it's kind of hard to track game to game because it oscillates so much. He's really started to gain feel for his curveball more, to where he's throwing it, um, you know, 15 to low 20% of the time now. I think that could be a game changer for him. It was a really good test for him to pitch against the Yankees last night, because was that last night? Yeah. The Yankees don't swing at pitches in the zone. The Yankees really hunt their pitches. So when I got to see the results last night, I was like, Logan only induced 2 swings and misses, but they just took everything. So I think it really showed his ability to throw, you know, to spam pitches in the zone, and I don't know. I think that's a really important thing to show, because he didn't have that last year. So now it's like, I would say he's really starting to round it out. So, you know, with Anders, we talked about Ray and Kirby improving on who they were earlier in the season. Um, we could see the same thing from Logan Gilbert too.
Our rotation kind of slaps, right? Like
Kind of.
top five, excluding Margot, because Margot's Margot, but you know
Marco is
everybody
Marco.
else, Margot's Margot. Everybody else can shove, man. Like, and I said this on Twitter the other day. I legitimately think that, no offense to Ray, no offense to Castillo, I think the highest upside in our rotation is Kirby. And that's
Mm.
sick, because he is 25 and he has thrown 70 innings in the major league level. And this could be a lot of fun next, not just this year, but next year. Because right now our rotation, our pitching in general is ranked 20th. Our bullpen is much better than that. So mostly we're being weighted down by the rotation. this rotation could really slap in the future. Don't sleep on it. Anything else for today, Mikey? You got to get to work.
I'm super, super, super excited to, I guess I'm going to listen to it on the way to work, but I'm super excited about this Luis Castillo start. And I don't know. I hope after everyone has listened, they're a little more excited about what went on, over the deadline.
Everybody's got to see it first, right? Castillo he's a myth right now, but as soon as he takes the mound and we see him strike out some Yankees, we'll get it. It'll click for us. All right. That'll be it for today. I'm Evan. You can find me on Twitter at Evan James Audio. You can find Mikey at _Kuya Mikey. You can find Anders at Anders Jorstad. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts, wherever it is you stream. Additionally, please support the podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/neversunny in Seattle. I'm going to link this as well as our Twitter handles and the Discord link in all the descriptions on YouTube and on Anchor, wherever else you listen to it. Thanks for listening. Go Mariners, and Castillo day 1. Let's go.